Next speaker is Dr. Rutger, and again, really sorry, Rutger, van Bergem. He's an economist and researcher at TU Delft, where he focuses on the economics of digital and physical infrastructure, including the political economy of large infrastructure project, budget overruns, and spatial planning for future cities. He earned his PhD in economics from George Mason University, where he also taught microeconomics and law and economics. And he's worked with some startups such as Coders Trust and Cadillaxy on digital education and e-commerce governance. Let's give him a round of applause, and here's the mic.
Thanks, Curtis. I will be talking a lot about spatial planning, so you might think I'm in the wrong section, but there will be an important element about urban finance in here. So we are here all together because Africa is urbanizing now. Decision makers need to get the governance of urbanization right, because once a city is built and interest groups are locked in, that's really hard to reform at that particular point and to change. So one question that I want to tackle today is a very important question in urban governance, which basically comes down to this, is what to build where. So what to build where in the city, and how can we actually know what the right thing is to build? So it is also the knowledge question that is involved. So in other words, what is optimal spatial governance? A while ago, or actually in the 20s of the century, Robin Hanson wrote a couple of blog posts that are very influential in this particular talk. And what he did there is basically combine three key ideas into two governance mechanisms. So I walk you through those three ideas step by step. And the first one might be very familiar to ones that are familiar with urban economics, which is the idea of maximizing total property value of a city. So it's not a super a good proxy, but it's much better than to follow maximizing this particular number. And it's much better than how urban governance usually goes. So why not follow this particular heuristic? So in the second idea, and he's most famous for this, some of you might know Futarchy. What it basically is allowing decision markets to inform important decisions. So whenever there's an observable metric, traders can trade on that, and that will inform a particular decision that can be made. So in this sense, we already have this particular metric, which is the total city property value that we can perhaps leverage in order to have decision markets for land use. And then the third idea that he combines is the idea of applying Harburger taxation. And we're going to use a particular variant of Harburger taxation in order to make this whole system work. And some of you might know what Harburger taxation is. What it basically means, this particular system, is that people can self-assess their property values. And they're taxed on that particular self-assessment. And an important caveat on that is, on their self-assessed value, people have to vacate the particular property. If someone comes in and says, well, I match your particular value, now that property belongs to someone else. Before I'm going to explain the two mechanisms, what we have done in the research is basically gamify these three ideas in the two mechanisms and then test them out in a laboratory. Let's start with the problem situation. This is actually the basis of the two games that we have done in the laboratory. And this is a common urban development dilemma. So in the middle there, and on the screen you see a red square, and that is a plot owned by a developer that he might like to develop because it might increase the total city value and he might get some benefits from that. And around that developer that wants to develop, there is 5 adjacent owners. And those adjacent owners will perhaps experience negative externalities. So the developer might want to build some infrastructure, high-rise development, whatever it is, the owners will expect negative externalities from that, so they might not like what is being built there. This is a common dilemma in city governance that we most of the time encounter. And what usually happens if the developer wants to build something is that a local council will follow the median voter. And the median voter in this sense is the owner, and the owner experiencing the negative externality will just say, well, no, not here, not in my backyard. So even if this particular development is good for the city, it might not get developed. It's very likely not to get developed. So in this particular example, the development would be good for the total city if we assume that all those declared values are actually true values, which is an important thing that we have to discuss. All right, so now we're going to go to the mechanisms. This is what we have used in a lab, and I will go from left to right. So the players will come into the laboratory, and they will go through several phases in the game, in which they have to reach a group decision on whether to develop a particular piece of land or not. And the first mechanism, called conditional Harburger, the first phase is extremely important. So let's switch back. So we have a developer, 5 owners. They're presented with private valuations under the 2 conditions, development and no development. And these values vary across every session that we have, and every session at 5 rounds. So they declare their conditional property value. So all owners and the developer will declare their value for their property under the development and the no development condition. Then they pay a conditional 1% Harburger taxation, and then our game software just simply looks at the total summation of those property values under development and no development and sums them up. And the highest summation will actually determine what development is the best for the city. If the developer and the owners actually declare those values truthfully, which is where the beauty of Harburger taxation comes in, because in the second phase, the speculators come in. So we have developer, owners, and speculators. The speculators want to make a buck on trading properties and flipping them over, and they trade in those observed prices. So they see the prices from the previous round, and they want to trade if they suspect under declaration. And they can make money on that because they want to then sell on later on. So this, in the game, then sort of enforces honest valuation by putting a penalty on under declaration. And then the urban finance part comes in. These Harburger taxation that comes in from the first phase goes into a tax revenue account. So that tax revenue account, we can create a financial asset on top of that. And that financial asset sort of tracks the revenue that comes in and is a direct measure of the total city property value. So owners and developer and the speculators will trade those shares that they have for the cash that they also have in their wallet. Then the next phase comes in, so the development is known. They will declare their property values on the development level that has been chosen. This time the Harburger taxation is much higher. Instead of 1%, it's 33%, reflecting the fact that after a short choice moment, there's a much larger period in which there's no development choice that is going to be made. And then the speculators, again, like in phase 2, come in and then speculate if they see under declaration or not. So this is conditional Harburger mechanism on the basis of Robin Hansen's ideas as applied in a particular game. And some of you people might already see a particular weakness in this. So if the developer is extremely savvy, why doesn't he over-declare his value for the property in the development state? So he might expect a lot of revenues from that, so why not declare a value that is hugely higher than his private valuation in order to increase the likelihood that this particular development level gets chosen? And then after that, he can just simply lower the value of that and then pay a lower tax for a longer period of time. So this mechanism can be gamed by the developer if he is smart enough to do so. And developers are savvy. How can we fix that? Well, we can apply decision markets to this particular process of development choice. This game is very similar, but it has some important differences. And the first phase will proceed like the first phase in conditional Harburger. First, the owners and the developer declare their conditional values for development and no development. And then in the second phase, the speculators come in to punish under declaration. But now this time, it's not been decided just yet what the correct level of development is. So therefore, the speculators buy conditional rights. So a conditional right to a particular property in a particular condition, development or no development. And then the magic comes in at phase 3. So instead of one market, we have 2 markets, decision markets, where people can speculate on the tax revenues that are going to be collected in the tax revenue account under the development condition or the non-development condition. So basically what we're asking them to do is to make a prediction about what development level creates the most revenue for the government, in this sense the city government. So traders trade, they leverage their decentralized knowledge, and the highest price of the tax revenue share will ultimately determine what level is, what development level will be chosen. Then in phase 4 and phase 5, the game proceeds as in the conditional harbinger tax. We see declarations again under the higher property tax, and as well the speculators come in to perhaps weed out under declaration. So now we sort of prevented under declaration, and also over declaration by the developer will not shift development levels. Okay, so how did we test this? We did 2 methodologies. The one is the classical economic experimentation in our newly founded IBEX lab at the TU Delft. So we basically read the instructions to the students. We recruited 164 students across the 2 conditions, Harburger and Futurkey. We let them play 7 sessions, 5 rounds each, and then we collected the data and see which mechanism does better. And one thing that we're really excited about that we've developed is we can also send those instructions, and we've built a software that connects the instructions to LLM agents on OpenAI, so we connect via the API by OpenAI. And then we build a middleware that routes all the messages, so the instructions come to the developer, come to the owners, come to the speculators. The instructions and their response per phase in the game is sent back to our game server that updates the game state and then sends back the information. And then the governance process through those phases proceeds as planned with the lab experiment. There's a lot of data. I cannot go through all of the data, so let me just be brief and talk about the most important stuff. So on the left-hand side, we see the lab outcomes. So basically, you can think of those as percentages. So no project in our sample, and there's actually a mistake I see here, it should be 40, so I should check my data set. But it should be 40, so we baked in our values, the value draws for private valuations of the developer and the owners under the 2 conditions. And it is actually so that under 40% of the cases, no project is the best way to go. So no development level. And then in the lab, Futurkey and Harburger basically got the right development level, whether it's no development or development, 70% of the time. Then the LLM outcomes, so the agentic AI approach. So we send in the instructions, they reason about what is best to do, and then they take an action in the game. We see much different results. We see Futurkey almost being perfect, but before we get excited, I don't think we should be. There's some caveats to that. And Harburger is optimal in 60% of the time. And you might guess why that is the case, because 60% of the time it is actually, in our experiment, better for the city to have this particular development go through. And the optimal outcome is obviously 100%. Okay, so let's zoom in on the decider. So in conditional Harburger, the total summation is the most important thing. Look at the left-hand side, there we have the lab outcomes. Left, on the x-axis, there's under-declare on a particular development level, and the unit is 100K. Right of the 0 point is over-declare on development. And on the y-axis, you have over-declare on no development, and under the 0 point, there's under-declare on no development. And what we see is that the owners and developer don't really understand the game. The only thing that they're trying to do is try to get their properties sold for higher than their private valuation, so they can make a buck on that. So they don't really understand that it determines the development level, and that they can do much better to influence that. And on the right-hand side, what we see the agents do in the game, and as we zoom in on the developer, which is the right-hand dot, is they over-declare on development in Harburger, which is what we would expect. That increases the likelihood of the development getting through. And the owners, you see them on the right-hand side there, on over-declare, on no development, they over-declare their value on the no development option, such as to increase the likelihood that the development doesn't go through. So if we look at the development decider in decision markets, we see that in the lab outcomes we have a lot of variance in trading, and in the LLM outcomes they seem to be trading on private valuations. We didn't observe manipulation, so we should be very careful there. Let me close off. Getting the governance urbanization right is very imperative. We've shown mechanisms that can probably do a lot better. It leverages market mechanisms to align individuals, and it also leverages private valuations. One little note, lab results are important, but with agentic AI, we can have much more intelligent decisions way quicker, and actually instead of spending one or 10,000 for student incentive pays, we used $50 in token payments. And we did it in 5 hours, so that is an amazing increase in efficiency in doing governance experiments. So let me close off by saying that the governance revolution is here, and we are here to help. Thank you very much.